All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. It's a book that's really had a profound impact, and we're going to unpack some of its key ideas and see if we can't, figure out how they might apply to our own lives.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting how Tolle's work, it's really resonated with so many people. It seems like there's this real hunger for what he's offering, this idea of finding inner peace and a more fulfilling way to actually be present in the world.
Yeah, totally. And it all kind of goes back to his own story, right? I mean, can you imagine years of debilitating anxiety and depression, and then bam, at 29, this total shift in consciousness?
It's wild. And the way he describes this awakening, it's so vivid, it's almost cinematic.
Yeah, it really is. He talks about being pulled into a vortex, facing this intense fear, and then poof, it's gone.
Yeah, and he uses all this powerful imagery, a diamond, the sound of birds, like he's hearing them for the first time in this dawn light, like pure love. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And it leads to one of his core ideas, that the root of our suffering, a lot of it at least, comes from what he calls the egoic mind.
Right. And it's not always easy to grasp.
Have you ever noticed how certain thoughts just kind of loop in your head over and over, like a broken record?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
It's like totally saying, hey, those thoughts, they're not really who you are. They're just noise, mental chatter keeping you stuck.
Yeah, it's like we're so caught up in our own thoughts.
Yeah.
We're always planning for the future or dwelling on the past, and we totally miss what's happening right now.
It's true. We're never really here, are we?
Not always.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Tully's not saying that thinking is bad.
Yeah.
It's more nuanced than that. It's about recognizing the difference between practical thinking, which we need, to get things done.
Right, like making a grocery list or figuring out directions.
Exactly. But then there's this other kind of thinking, this compulsive thinking, which is that like draining mental noise that keeps us from being present.
So it's not about stopping thinking altogether.
Right. It's about becoming aware of those thought patterns
Yeah.
and learning to detach from the ones that are causing us pain.
And that's where this idea of watching the thinker comes in, right?
Yeah. Imagine your mind is a busy highway.
Oh, I laugh.
Cars whizzing by, those are your thoughts. And instead of getting caught up in the traffic, you step back and you just become this peaceful observer,
Yeah.
watching those thoughts go by without judging them.
Yeah. I love that analogy. It makes it seem a lot less, abstract.
Right. But then you might be thinking, well, how do I actually do that?
Exactly. It sounds a bit, out there.
It starts with just noticing those thought patterns, those broken records. Just notice them with a gentle, curiosity. Don't try to push them away. And as you do this more and more, you might start to notice this sense of presence arising, this deeper awareness that's beyond the thoughts themselves.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, it's about creating that space between your thoughts and your awareness.
It's like we're taking back control instead of letting our thoughts control us.
Yeah, realizing, hey, I'm not these thoughts. I'm the one observing them. And in that awareness, you can find freedom and peace.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it connects to another key idea that Tolle talks about, this concept of time. He argues that it's actually our obsession with the past and the future, what he calls psychological time. That's a major source of, negativity. What do you think about that?
Well, I think he's onto something. When you think about it, worry is all about the future, right? And regret, that's all about the past. Both of those things pull us out of the present moment, which is the only place where life is actually happening.
That's so true. We're always either dwelling on what's already happened or stressing about what might happen. But we rarely, just stop and appreciate what is happening right now.
Yeah, and at Tully's perspective, it's pretty radical. He's not just saying, hey, manage your time better. He's actually questioning the way we experience reality. He says, the time-bound mind itself is the problem.
Whoa, so it's not about fitting more into our day. It's about shifting our whole relationship with time.
Exactly. And he makes this interesting distinction between life situation and
Right.
life, right?
Okay.
Our life situation, it's all that mind stuff, trapped in time, past regrets, future worries. But life, real life, is happening right now. He asks this question, do you have a problem right now? It's powerful. It cuts through all the mental clutter and brings us back to the present.
Yeah, it really does make you realize that most of our problems, they're actually in our heads. I mean, obviously our external circumstances matter, but often the suffering comes from, the stories we tell ourselves about those circumstances.
Totally. And by shifting our attention to the honoring, now we can kind of step out of those mental dramas and find more peace even when things are tough.
That's a great point. And it leads us to another key concept, this idea of the pain body. Now, that might sound a little strange at first,
Yeah, it did to me too when I first encountered it.
but it's a really insightful way to understand how emotional pain can get trapped in our bodies and create these repeating patterns of suffering.
Right, so it's not just in our minds, it's in our bodies too. That's
Okay.
fascinating. Tolle describes it as an energy field of accumulated emotional pain. It's like a shadow self that lives inside us,
Mm.
feeding on anything that gives it that, negative energy.
So it's almost like this hidden part of us that wants to keep us stuck in those patterns.
Exactly. And it seeks to survive by pulling us into experiences that create more suffering. Have you ever noticed how certain situations trigger familiar feelings of anger or sadness or fear?
Oh, all the time.
That's the pain body being activated.
Wow, that makes so much sense. So now I'm really curious, how do we actually work with this pain body? It sounds pretty intense.
It can be, yeah. But Tolle offers some pretty powerful tools, and we'll dive into those.
After a short break?
Right. So where were we? Oh yeah, the pain body, this hidden energy field of all the emotional pain we've accumulated.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. And we were just about to get into how to actually deal with it.
Right, right. Well, Tolle's big thing is awareness is key. It's not about pushing those painful feelings away,
Mm.
trying to pretend they're not there. It's more about shining a light on them, bringing them into our conscious awareness.
So it's kind of like acknowledging those dark corners of ourselves. Like instead of pretending they don't exist, we're like, hey, there you are.
Exactly. And it's it's not always easy. Tolle actually has this practice. It takes a lot of honesty and courage, I think. He says, when there's no way out, there's always a way through. Don't turn away from the pain. Face it. Feel it fully. Feel it. Don't think about it.
Wow, that's intense. But I guess it makes sense, right? We're so used to creating stories around our pain, but he's saying just go beyond that and really just feel the raw sensation of it.
Yeah, it's about getting to the core of it. He's really cautious about suppressing or denying our feelings. He says that just makes them, stronger and more likely to come out in unhealthy ways.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It just
Totally.
pops up somewhere else.
Exactly. Tolle says, give all your attention to the feeling, not to the person, the event, whatever that seems to have caused it. Yeah, don't blame, don't create a victim story. Just be with the feeling.
So it's about taking responsibility without the blame.
Yeah, yeah. But I think a lot of people would say okay, but how? How do you just sit with those raw emotions? Isn't that scary?
Yeah, I can see how that would be intimidating.
Well, Tolle actually uses this really powerful image, this metaphor for what happens when we do that, when we really embrace the pain. He says, as you go into the feeling, be intensely alert, really pay attention. At first, it might seem like a dark and terrifying place. And when the urge comes up to turn away from it, just observe it. Don't act on it. Just keep bringing your attention back to the pain. Stay alert, stay present with your whole being, every cell of your body. And he says, as you do so, you are bringing a light into this darkness. This is the flame of your consciousness.
That is beautiful.
Right.
It's like we're using awareness to actually transform the pain into something else.
Right. And that's where the watching comes in.
Yeah.
You're not getting lost in it. You're holding it in that light of awareness. Remember,
Mhm.
Tolle says, unconsciousness creates it. Consciousness transmutes it.
So it's our awareness that makes the transformation possible. It's like if you hold a piece of ice really tightly, it stays frozen. But if you open your hand and you let the warmth of your touch melt it, it transforms into water.
That's a perfect analogy. And that brings us to this idea of forgiveness, which, Tolle sees as kind of a natural outcome of all of this. He says, you can't really forgive yourself or others as long as you're deriving your sense of self from the past. As long as we're clinging to that hurt, that resentment, we're stuck.
Yeah, if our identity is all wrapped up in those past grievances, then letting go of them can feel like we're losing part of ourselves, I guess.
Right. But Tolle says when we access that power of head, now that's when we can truly let go of the past and experience real forgiveness. He says this renders the past powerless. And you realize deep down that nothing you ever did or that was ever done to you could even touch that radiant essence of who you are. It's like all that baggage we carry, all those hurts and resentments, we can just put it down.
That sounds so freeing. But I have to ask, how does that actually happen? Do we just force ourselves to forget?
No, no, not at all. He's very clear about that. True forgiveness isn't something you force. It arises naturally from a state of presence, from acceptance. When you're no longer identified with the pain of the past,
Mhm.
there's just like nothing to forgive. Like it just dissolves.
So it's not about condoning what happened. It's about releasing the hold it has on us.
Exactly. It's powerful, right? Our true nature, our essence, it's untouched by our experiences, no matter what we've done or what's been done to us.
It's a beautiful message of hope. We're not defined by our past. We have the power to choose, a new way of being in each moment. Okay, so we've talked about working with the pain body and forgiveness, but what about this idea of surrender that Tolle talks about? I mean, it's a word that can be a bit, loaded.
Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot of people think of surrender as like weakness or giving up. But Tolle means something different. He's very clear that surrender is not about resignation or being passive. It's about letting go of that inner resistance to what is, like accepting the present moment, even if it's unpleasant. And he uses this great analogy, walking through fog with a flashlight.
I remember that one.
The fog is like our life situation.
Yeah.
It's murky, it's unclear, and the flashlight, that's our conscious presence illuminating the path, like one step at a time. And surrender is about like focusing that light on the, now not on all the worries and fears swirling around us.
So it's not about just passively accepting anything that happens. It's about shifting our focus, our energy.
Exactly. Tolle's argument is that surrender is actually what makes real positive action possible. When we're not so busy resisting, fighting, we tap into a deeper source of energy.
It's like when you're swimming against the current, you just get exhausted. But if you surrender to the flow, you can move with so much more ease.
Exactly. It's like effortless action.
I think about it like when I'm forcing myself to do something I don't really want to do, it's such a struggle. But when I'm really aligned with what I'm doing, it just flows.
Right. It's like riding the wave instead of fighting against it.
Yeah.
But of course, surrender can be hard, especially when, life throws you those curveballs.
Yeah, totally. And Tolle talks about limit situations,
Right.
those experiences that really force us to face our fears, our limitations, like a serious illness, the loss of a job, the death of someone we love, those moments when everything changes.
Exactly. And those are the times when, the illusion of control just shatters and we have no choice but to face the present moment. And Tolle actually says that these situations, as difficult as they also have this incredible potential for awakening.
So it's like all the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what our life should be, it all just falls apart. And we're left with the raw reality of now.
Yeah, and in that space, that vulnerability, some deeper truth can emerge. A lot of people who have like near-death experiences, they talk about this feeling of profound peace, even joy.
It's amazing. Like by letting go of everything they thought they knew, they discover something deeper, this connection to something bigger than themselves.
Right. It's pretty powerful. And there's one more thing I wanted to touch on about surrender. Totally connected to this idea of like spiritual energy.
Oh, interesting.
He suggests that, when we let go of that resistance, we tap into this source of power that's way bigger than our own like limited mental energy.
So it's almost like we're plugging into a universal power source.
Exactly. And he's very clear that this energy is always available, but we can only really access it when we're in that state of surrender.
So surrender isn't a one-time thing, it's an ongoing practice, a way of like approaching life with more presence, more acceptance.
Absolutely. It's about
Okay.
cultivating that willingness to let go of control, to trust the wisdom of the present moment. And this all ties into how we create a new reality, both individually and collectively, which...
We'll get to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. This pain body, forgiveness, surrender. It's pretty amazing stuff. But I'm curious how it all comes together. How do these pieces actually help us create a new reality for ourselves and like for the world?
Well, Tolle is really big on this idea that our like individual level of consciousness, it actually impacts the world around us.
Yeah.
It's like a ripple effect. We're not just passive observers. We're active participants in shaping reality.
So it's not just about like feeling more peaceful ourselves. It's about recognizing that our inner state actually has an influence.
Exactly. And he says, the human world, it's largely a creation of the mind. And since we're all interconnected, a shift in one person's consciousness can create these positive ripples outward.
Hmm?
He even talks about the possibility of like a completely different order of reality where harmony and peace prevail.
That sounds pretty amazing, but is that really possible? Given all the conflict and suffering we see in the world.
It's a big question, yeah. But Tolle points to the transformative power of presence. He says, It's only at this point, like when you transcend the world, that you can really bring about a better world.
So it's not about forcing change from, like, our ego. It's more about finding that inner peace and letting that ripple outward.
Yeah. It's like he uses this analogy of a deep lake.
Hmm.
The surface might be all choppy, turbulent, but the depths, they stay still and undisturbed.
So we can be in the world, but not of it. Like
Yeah.
finding that stillness within no matter what's happening around us.
Exactly. And that leads us to like true compassion.
Mm.
Tolle says it comes from, recognizing our interconnectedness, not just pity or obligation.
So it's more about recognizing our shared humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this ties into this idea of like enlightened relationship.
Yeah, we're not just talking about romantic relationships here.
Right. It's about how we relate to everything, everyone in our lives. Tolle says in an enlightened relationship, the need for games, manipulation, all of that just falls away. He describes it as like you are yourself. You don't judge yourself. And the split caused by like self-reflective consciousness, it's healed.
That's a beautiful vision. But how do we actually cultivate this kind of relationship with ourselves, with others?
Well, presence is a big part of it. It's about bringing our full attention to each moment, listening deeply, responding with like authenticity and compassion.
So being present becomes the foundation for a more loving way of being in the world.
Yeah. And it can be as simple as choosing to see the world with fresh eyes, appreciating the beauty that's all around us. Tully talks about this practice. He says, as you go about your life, don't give 100% of your attention to the external world and to your mind. Keep some within. Feel the inner body, even when you're doing, everyday stuff, especially when you're in relationships or when you're connecting with nature. Feel that stillness deep inside. Keep the portal open.
It's true. Like, sometimes I get so caught up in what I'm doing, whether it's work or, even something I enjoy. But when I can tap into that presence, it's like everything shifts.
And as we do that, we might start to experience glimpses of what Tolle calls the unmanifested, this like formless, timeless reality that underlies all of creation.
That sounds pretty mystical.
It is, yeah, but he says it's accessible to all of us. We don't have to go searching for it somewhere out there. It's within. It's in the stillness of the present moment.
So it's like this journey inward is also a journey outward, a journey into like the heart of reality.
Yeah, and I think that's what's been so great about this deep dive into the power of now. It's not just about reading a book, or listening to a podcast. It's about actually embodying these principles, making presence a habit, a way of life that leads to more peace, more joy, deeper connection.
And that's what we're all looking for, isn't it? A more fulfilling way to be, a way of being that benefits not just ourselves, but everyone around us.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one last question from Tolle to ponder. He says, if our level of consciousness shapes the world around us, what kind of reality are you creating right now?
That's a powerful question. We really encourage you to explore Tolle's work further and, just experiment with this practice of presence in your own life. See what you discover. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the power of now.